Tonight's guest speaker, Kelly Martin, is the president of Florida Leatherbacks Incorporated. Kelly received a bachelor's degree from Michigan State University and a master's degree from the University of South Florida, and has worked with sea turtles in various capacities for 22 years. As a sea turtle biologist, Kelly has been researching leatherback sea turtles on and off since 2003. In 2013, she co-founded Florida Leatherbacks Incorporated, a nonprofit dedicated to studying and protecting the leatherbacks that nest on South Florida's beaches. This work incorporates turtle tagging, satellite tracking, and genetic analysis to help better understand and protect the leatherback sea turtles that nest right here in our region. Tonight, Kelly will be telling us more about her long-term research project focused on these prehistoric giants that we have showing up on our beaches under the cover of darkness. Please help me welcome to the stage, Kelly Martin.
All right, thank you so much. I guess first things first, can you hear me okay? Otherwise, I may need to adjust this a little bit. Let's see here. All right, can everybody hear me okay? Is that volume good? All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much to Zach for that great introduction. Also wanted to obviously thank the... I may have to take your mic there, Zach. There we go. Otherwise, I'm going to have to hold it like this the whole time. I don't know. Thank you so much to the Florida Oceanographic Society for hosting me tonight. Really appreciate that. I don't know if you guys have any suggestions or if you want me to hold that mic. Okay, sounds good. So thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I really appreciate the turnout tonight. This is a great crowd. I know it's a Sea Turtle Talk. It's charismatic megafauna. Everybody loves them. So appreciate all of you for turning up. Also, thank you to our Zoom crowd. Really appreciate everybody who's tuning in online. Again, my name's Kelly. As Zach mentioned, I have been working with sea turtles for approximately 23 years now. So obviously since I was 5. No, I'm just kidding. It's been my life passion. I started right out of undergraduate, and I love what I do. So essentially what I have tonight is just a brief introduction to the sea turtles that nest here on our beaches, and then a little bit more about the research project that I've been working on for the last 20 years or so with leatherback sea turtles, which are truly special to me and very unique to this environment. So obviously, basic introduction, there are only 7 species of sea turtle worldwide. 6 of the 7, actually, depending on where you are in the world, 6 of the 7 are considered endangered and threatened. All of these in the United States are protected by federal, state, county, and municipal laws. So these are marine air-breathing reptiles. A lot of people don't understand that they do have to reach the surface to breathe. So they're air-breathing reptiles, and they've remained pretty much unchanged for 150 million years. On the bottom right there, you will see a skeleton of Archelon. That's actually one of the ancient extinct species of sea turtle. But for the last 150 million years, the 7 species that we have on the planet right now have remained relatively unchanged. They do reach maturity, we say similar to humans, 15 to 30. I guess that depends on what kind of human you're dealing with. But they also have a lifespan of upwards of 60 years. I know everybody's seen Finding Nemo, where they say 150 years. We don't know for sure, but we do know they live upwards of 60 years. So in our area, a lot of you are locals, so you may know our nesting season starts on March 1st, runs through October 31st. We are starting to reach before and after that kind of term limit there. We do have quite a few nests in the area already that started as early as February 4th this year. But nesting surveys are basically the one method that we have to really understand the long-term population status of these animals. They're open ocean animals, they're hard to find, they're hard to study when they're underwater. So nesting surveys are really the primary method that we use for understanding how well this population is doing. And these surveys around the state of Florida are conducted by biologists, volunteers, nonprofits, park staff, even state employees. So just an example of the 7 species that you'll see around the globe. Across the top of your screen there, those are our 3 primary nesters that we get here. So we get green turtles on the left, loggerheads in the middle, and leatherback sea turtles on the right. And as I mentioned before, and this is kind of my little, before we get into the fun stuff about what we do and the research that we do, I do need to tell everybody a little bit about what you can do to help protect these animals. As I mentioned, they're all threatened and endangered. So a lot of people say, what can I do? Even if you don't live on the beach, if you don't live in a nesting habitat, even if you don't really go out in the ocean, there's a lot of things that you could do in your day-to-day life to help ensure the survival of sea turtles. One of the main threats that we have, and a lot of you may be familiar with this around here because it's one of the big things that we push out, is coastal lighting. And a lot of people don't understand why that's so important, but these animals are using light cues to orient. So when they come up on the beach to nest, or when these hatchlings emerge, they're actually using natural light cues to orient themselves to where they need to be, whether up on the nesting beach or back to the water. So it can interfere with their sea finding ability. It affects both hatchlings and adults, but essentially, what we are looking for is a reduction in the amount of light that is visible from the nesting beach. And a lot of times people assume that only impacts sea turtles if you live on the coast, but that's actually not true. On the coast, it is very, very important, and it's actually usually part of municipal laws that you keep your lights shielded, you keep them low to the ground, but also the color is the most important thing. So you'll notice that what we push a lot is what's called amber lighting, so it's more of a red-orange color. Sea turtles aren't as sensitive to that color range as they are to white lighting. So you'll see a lot of coastal properties are fit with red or orange lighting, and it's also kept low to the ground and shielded. But we're also noticing a big problem with inland sky glow. So even people who live in major cities, suburbs, things like that, not just for the sea turtles, but also for your protection, it's really important to reduce the amount of unnecessary light that you have. You'll notice a big difference in your electric bill. So if you can cut down on the number of lights that you have on overnight or around your property, it really does make a huge difference. And this is just kind of a visual of what we're looking at as far as when we talk about inland sky glow. So those around the coast, yes, obviously those are the people that we're usually talking to, but this inland sky glow you can see on that lower left picture there is a huge problem, even on some of the most well-maintained darkest beaches that we have. I did include one statistic here. An estimated 1/3 of all lighting in the United States is wasted. That's a total cost of about $2 billion a year. And that's a lot of things like, you'll notice some of the bigger car lots, gas stations, things like that are very well lit, which is for security. But some minor adjustments, things like shielding it so that it's only down to the parking lot instead of shooting up into the sky, can make a huge difference and cut down on the electric bill. Another thing that a lot of people have seen as a major threat to nesting sea turtles is beach furniture. Another thing is holes. You'll notice that we say a lot, please fill in your holes, knock down your sandcastles. The beaches here, particularly in Martin County, are the densest nested beaches in the state of Florida. Things like one small chair or maybe a hole can pose a huge threat to nesting turtles and particularly hatchlings. So make sure you're pulling your furniture off the beach at night. And for those of you that have kids, grandkids, or even if you like to go out and dig a big hole on the beach, just make sure you're filling it in when you leave or knock down the sandcastles that could pose an obstacle to our turtles. This is one of the biggest threats, and we also hear this all around the country, is marine pollution. Whether you live on the beach or not, we do know that plastic is a problem. So we do ask that you be mindful of your day-to-day selection of objects that you're using for food storage and things like that. Plastic bottles, water bottles, most of that ends up in our oceans. And a lot of times it poses an entanglement threat, or it poses a threat as far as diet. These turtles, they don't really think about what they're consuming. If it fits in their mouth, they're going to eat it. So all the plastic in our ocean does pose a huge threat to them. So when you're out shopping, try not to use plastic bags. Try to eliminate water bottles and things like that. Even when you're shopping, just be mindful of what containers your food is in. And then commercial fisheries are probably the biggest threat to sea turtles around the globe. So bycatch, it's something that some people are familiar with, some are not. But a lot of the commercial fishing operations use what are called trawl nets or drift nets on the bottom, things like that, that are used to basically drag along the bottom, catch shrimp, fish, things like that. And fortunately, it's also going to entangle sea turtles, marine mammals, things that need to reach the surface to breathe. So if they're caught in these nets, they're not able to reach the surface to breathe. One statistic I want everybody to know, bycatch means up to 20 pounds of unintended animals are caught for every 1 pound of intended catch. And that's particularly true for the shrimping industry. So every 1 pound of shrimp that we're consuming, 20 pounds of unintended catch are also caught and discarded overboard unnecessarily. So one of the biggest things I suggest is if you have a mobile phone, download the Seafood Watch app. It's wonderful. If you're out at a restaurant or you're at a grocery store trying to figure out what a sustainable option might be for purchasing, this will tell you what some of the good options are and what some of the bad options are as far as what you purchase for your seafood. So that was my little lecture on how to protect our animals. Now I want to show you some of the fun stuff about what we do. So this is a little bit of our leatherback research that we conduct in South Florida here. Pardon me while I get some water. So leatherbacks are the largest turtle on the planet. Adults average 7 to 8 feet in length. The largest leatherback ever caught was actually over 2,000 pounds. They are the only living member of their family. As I mentioned, there are 7 species of turtle. The other 6 are what we call hard-shelled turtles. They have a bony shell. These guys don't really have that, and I'll show you in a little bit why that's important. They also have the widest distribution of any reptile. So they can live in temperate to tropical waters and in 3 of our 4 oceans. So as I mentioned, they have a lack of a bony shell. They actually have kind of, if you were able to touch one, it feels like almost like a tire. It's a rubbery, oily connective tissue, almost like a skin. It's actually very sensitive. If you were to scratch it, it would bleed. And the reason that they have this, they don't have a hard, bony structure like the other species of turtles because these guys dive really deep, and that flexible shell is able to expand and contract as they dive. So actually the deepest known dive of one of these turtles is over 4,000 feet. So that's similar to some of our deepest diving whales. But yeah, without that hard bony structure, they are able to expand and contract as they dive under some of these deep pressures. They also have these ridges. So if you look on that right picture there, you'll see 7 lines running down that carapace or top shell. That actually just helps with hydrodynamics and that teardrop shape. That helps them keep up speed, get down to that 4,000 foot depth. And another fun thing, a lot of people who have ever seen has anybody in the audience ever seen a leatherback? Just show of hands. Oh, hey, all right, great. Quite a few of you actually. A lot of times people who've seen a leatherback and see their head, which is that right picture there, say they have an injury on the top of their head. They see that pink or red color and they think that turtle was injured. Surprisingly, it's not. Every single leatherback has one of these. We call it a pink spot. And they're actually unique to each turtle. So it's kind of like a thumbprint. You can identify them based on this if you're able to get a picture. And what it is actually a window to the pineal gland or part of the brain. So it's very translucent, and it actually allows them to detect changes in daylight, changes in day length, and it's kind of a migratory cue for them. They are also adapted to tolerate cold temperatures. I'll show you some maps later on to see how far these turtles are venturing. But our turtles are able to tolerate Canadian waters. They are able to venture where it's much colder than most turtles would be able to survive. A lot of that is just because of their size. They're very massive animals, and they also have a very, very thick layer of fat that's all part of their shell and part of their flipper structure. And they have a unique thing. It's called counter-current heat exchange. It's basically a fancy term for the way their blood vessels are arranged. So they are reducing the amount of heat that is lost from the core of the body as it travels to the end of their flippers, and then increasing the amount of heat that returns to the core. So they're able to kind of adapt to some of those colder temperatures that most of our marine reptiles wouldn't be able to do. And I know I asked how many people have seen leatherbacks. Now, how many people in the audience have been on a turtle walk where you actually get to go out and see nesting females? If you've had the opportunity to do that, a lot of times you'll notice what they say is the nesting female crying or producing tears. In that photo on the right, you'll see that they are producing this extremely thick solution that does look like tears from their eyes. So a lot of people, when they see turtle nesting, will say, you know, it's a mother turtle crying because she's leaving her eggs behind. I love that story. Not entirely true. It's actually a unique method that they have for removing salt from their body. So these guys, as they're eating, are obviously ingesting a lot of salt water. They need a way to get the salt out of their body. They can't digest all of that. So they have very large glands behind their eyes that are actually able to process the salt out of the body and excrete it in this thick mucousy solution. So that's actually what you see coming out of their eyes, is this salty solution that they remove salt with in the form of tears. So my favorite thing about leatherbacks, a little terrifying, they have a modified esophagus. So these turtles are feeding almost solely on jellyfish or a gelatinous diet. So basically, slimy things. They have a modified esophagus that helps them ingest their prey. And it's kind of the thing nightmares are made of. So this is actually the inside of a leatherback's mouth. The inside of their mouth and their esophagus is lined with what we call papillae. Those are actually rigid. They're not sharp. They're kind of like fingertips. And basically, they all point down. So as these turtles are ingesting their prey, those little points are helping the food go in the right direction. They don't want it coming back up. So that's what their mouth looks like. It's a little terrifying, but it's not that bad. One thing, they are actually foraging. Usually, I said they go up to Canada. Usually when they're up there, they're looking for these giant fields of jellyfish. They are able to consume their weight in jellyfish a day. And they're going up and they're finding jellyfish that are almost the size of them or as long as they are. So they're finding these massive animals up there. I mentioned their maximum dive depth already. They do spend a lot of time at the surface. Most people think they're going to be underwater a lot, but they do surface every 4 to 10 minutes to breathe. They can stay under for over an hour, sometimes a couple hours, but they spend as much as 30 to 40% of their time at the surface. So this is just the Atlantic Ocean, some of their major nesting beaches. Florida is actually not that big of a nesting beach. One of the biggest populations was actually found on the western coast of Africa recently in Gabon. But the northern coast of South America and Suriname, French Guiana is one of the biggest nesting beaches they have. So here in Florida, this is one of our teg turtles. They typically nest from March through June. Every time they emerge, they're laying about 60 to 80 eggs. The sex of the turtles is actually determined by the temperature of the sand in which those eggs incubate. So warmer temperatures during that incubation period are going to produce more female turtles. Cooler temperatures are going to produce more males. And it usually takes about 60 to 80 days for those eggs to hatch. After that period, hopefully you get something that looks like this. So this is actually a nest of leatherback that hatched early in the morning, right at sunrise, that one of our team members happened to cross. But the leatherback hatchlings look very similar to the adults. They have the same ridges, they have the same massive front flippers, and they're just pretty cute. They're my favorite. So usually the hatching would occur at night, but we do get lucky sometimes right at sunrise, and we'll see an entire nest emerge on our beaches here. So here's what's been going on in Florida, and this graph only goes up to 2019. But leatherbacks really didn't nest in Florida until probably about the 1960s or 70s, and we knew nothing about them here in the state. They kind of showed up, and really, as you can see from that graph there, they just started increasing exponentially. We still didn't know why they suddenly showed up. We didn't know how many there were. We didn't know how well the population was doing. As I mentioned before, those nesting surveys were really the only way that we had to kind of understand what was going on with the population. So there's all these things that we really wanted to know. How many are out there? How often are they returning to nest? Is the population stable? What's going on? Only thing that we knew at the time was that they were here and that their numbers were increasing. So we kind of sat down with a group of people, and this was back in the early 2000s, actually about 1999, to try and figure out how are we going to answer all these questions that we don't know about this population. And really the only way to do that would be to develop a long-term hands-on research program where we're actually out on the nesting beach trying to figure out how many are there, what are they doing, what can we learn about them. So this is just kind of a group of organizations that originally sat down back in 2000 and said, let's make it happen, let's do this. So it initially started in Palm Beach County. There was a bunch of organizations that were involved at the time. And essentially what we had to do is we had to go out during that nesting season and identify each individual female, and then come up with a way to ID them as they continue to return over the years. So we developed a tagging program where we were just going to use these small metal tags that have a unique code stamped into them. And we were going to survey the beaches during nesting season. And every time we documented a female, we would look at those tags and know who she was. We could look her up. In addition to those flipper tags, because those don't always last, those flipper tags are kind of like a cattle ear tag that you would see. We were also using pit tags. So same thing we're putting in our dogs and cats now. All of these turtles also got one of those microchips. And for 11 years, we conducted this study on 6 miles of northern Palm Beach County. So this was down in Juno Beach, Jupiter area. And there's a lot of numbers there. But in 11 years, we identified 466 unique individuals, which was great because in the year 2000, when we started this, state wildlife officials only thought there was maybe 100 turtles throughout the entire state. So 466 was great, just in that little 12-mile range that we were working on. Averaged about 100 females per year. And they were coming back about every 2 to 3 years and laying 2 to 4 nests per year. We also started looking at additional techniques that we could use to track these animals. So we started using satellite technology. This is a very, very outdated photo. This is from 2005. We don't do this anymore. Obviously, we all know we've got these cell phones in our pockets. Technology has advanced a lot. We are no longer required to use this much equipment just to track a single turtle. But we've been tracking them since 2002 in South Florida. And here's just some examples of short-term and long-term data. So on the right, that's typical travels of a turtle from about June through July or August of a single season. So nesting in Florida, they're spending quite a bit of time down off the Florida region here. Once they're done nesting for the season, they're going to head up the coast of the Carolinas. If you track them for a little longer, from nesting season down here all the way up to about September, August, some of our turtles are going all the way up, as I mentioned earlier, off the coast of Canada. So here's a little animation. It's a couple minutes long. So on the bottom left, you'll see there's multiple tracks in this map. So this region right here, this is where our turtles are spending their March through June. So while they're here nesting with us, they're kind of hanging out along the coast. And then we hit June. They're done nesting. They're going to branch out. Some of our turtles are going to head out towards the middle of the Atlantic. A lot of our turtles actually end up just wandering up the east coast of the US. We get quite a few that stay off the coast of South Carolina up to New York and New Jersey. But as I mentioned, we do get some that head up here off the coast of Nova Scotia. We have never actually tracked a turtle as far as Europe, but we do believe some of our turtles are going there. So they're really utilizing the entire Atlantic basin. They're using deep water, shallow water. Unfortunately, a lot of these turtles that spend their time along the eastern coast here are also utilizing the same space as a lot of our commercial shipping traffic. So it's kind of a big threat that they face in that area. We're also looking at dive behavior. We have new tags that are pretty small now. They can look at how often they're diving, how deep they're diving, how much time they're spending at the surface. And one of my favorite projects is actually genetic analysis. So we've been able to take a small tissue sample from these females and create this entire family tree. So we've been able to find mother-daughter pairs. We've been able to find full sibling pairs. We've been able to find turtles that aren't related at all. So we're able to look at relatedness, but the other important thing here is looking at population origin. So if you remember, I said they didn't really nest here until prior to the 60s and 70s. Where did they come from? One of the things we've been able to do is compare these genetic samples to other big nesting regions. We found that a lot of our turtles actually originated from beaches in Costa Rica, St. Croix, Trinidad, found their way here somehow, and it turned out to be a suitable environment, so they ended up staying here. So we did that for 11 years on the Juno Beach and Jupiter area. We kind of thought, okay, what else can we do? So I mentioned before, they were every 2 to 3 years they would return to nest. They were taking some time off. But we had some turtles that we wouldn't see for 14 years or more. Where were they going in between? Were we missing them? Were they really not returning for that long? We also noted that most turtles were laying about 2 nests a year. But that was just based on when we were seeing them. We did see some turtles that laid as many as 9 in a single season. So are there turtles that are only nesting twice, or are we missing them? Are they going somewhere else? Are they nesting down the beach a little bit? If we say that each turtle is only nesting twice a year, we're really going to overestimate the population. So we've got to do something to answer some of these questions. So 11 years ago, up here in Martin County, we started the first tagging study to occur up here with leatherbacks. Just basically wanted to increase our sample size, address some of those questions we were really missing. So, for example, in 2013, Palm Beach County had 253 nests. Martin County had a lot more, 352. So that's why we decided, okay, maybe we should go to where the turtles are going. There's more turtles up here. There's less space, too. Martin County is a lot shorter than Palm Beach County. So Martin County has 39% of the statewide total of leatherbacks, but only 2.7% of the coastline. So we kind of realized the value of these beaches up here and why we should be doing some research up here. So it was our first year, it was 2014. It was kind of just a test year. We only went out for a few weeks. We did a very short section of Jupiter Island and a little bit of the Hobe Sound Refuge in St. Lucie Inlet State Park. So just in that minimal effort, just a few weeks on a short stretch of beach, we had 173 encounters with 101 unique individuals. So it was wildly successful. Of those 101 turtles that we tagged, 51 of them had not been tagged previously. So it was a good move. We started getting some of these new turtles that we had never discovered before. We were pretty excited about the move. And it also indicated that the site fidelity was pretty poor. What we thought was just 2 nests per year from that previous study, we knew we were wrong because we saw 50 of the turtles that we tagged down there on this new site up in Martin County. So for the first 5 years of the project, this is just what I had summarized initially, we saw leatherbacks up here 1,434 times, which was very impressive. We saw nearly 500 unique individuals. 180 of those were new, meaning they had not been previously tagged. The rest had been tagged down in that Palm Beach County project that we started in 2002. So we were starting to see a gradual decrease in the number of new turtles or untagged turtles. So basically what it meant is we were basically saturating the population. We were starting to incorporate more of it, and we were getting more of those turtles tagged. We also started doing a lot more satellite transmitters. We did 19, actually I think it was a little more than, I can't remember how many transmitters we did, but we've done several dozen transmitters in Martin County now. And in that first 20 years of the study, we encountered 870 tagged turtles and had over 4,000 encounters. As I mentioned, the state had originally thought there were less than 100 females nesting in the entire state of Florida. So for us to have nearly 1,000 turtles was really a success for us. So just some kind of results of our satellite tracking. This is just a 1 internesting cycle interval. So these turtles come up, lay their eggs, they leave for a little while, but they actually return within 9 to 11 days and nest again. So in those 9 to 11 days, they're leaving our Martin County site down here. Most of them head up here to the Canaveral area, cruise back down again before they nest again in 9 to 11 days. So it's a very short window that they're coming back again. And this is another video here just kind of showing the previous one was short-term tracks. This is more of our long-term tracks from 3 turtles that we tracked in 2019. Just to give you an idea, you'll see them circling down there at the bottom. That was when they were continuing to return to nest. Once they were done, heading up the coast. So 2 of our turtles up here did kind of the classic thing. They tend to hang out up in the New York, New Jersey area. This one kind of remained a little bit more coastal down here in the Georgia, South Carolina area. So we're really learning that each of them has very different behavior. They all have their own personalities. They all have their own travel patterns. So this is the part where it's just fun. I like to tell stories from the field. So essentially what we're doing is March through June, we gear up, whether it's raining or sunny or cold or warm, And we hit the beaches of Martin County about usually 9 to 10 p.m. And we have a crew out on our ATVs, and we're driving up and down the coastline all night long, just searching for these leatherback turtles. They all get names. All of our family members have turtles named after them. Our pets have turtles named after them. So we developed quite a relationship with these animals. We love what we do. We are an entirely volunteer-based organization. So really it's more about the passion for us as well as the research. So I just wanted to include you guys in some of the fun things that we've found in the 20 plus years that we've been doing this. If you follow us on social media, or if you should happen to follow the Sea Turtle Conservancy, they conduct an annual tour to turtles where they put satellite transmitters on 10 leatherbacks. 5 of those are here in Florida, 5 of those are down in Panama, and they're basically looking to see who's gonna swim the farthest. So this is a turtle that has been in this contest for 4 years now. She's one of our regulars. Her name's Lady Jane. She actually had a transmitter put on in 2021. Now she's unique. As I mentioned before, these turtles usually skip 2 to 3 years before they return to Florida to nest again. Lady Jane likes to nest in consecutive years. So we originally tagged her in 2018. She came back again in 2019. Then she skipped a year. We tagged her with a satellite transmitter in 2021 as part of the Tour de Turtles. She came back again in 22. She skipped 2023. And she returned again. She's one of our faithful Jupiter Island nesters. So she returned again last year, 2024. So she got another transmitter to participate in the Tour de Turtles. So this is Lady Jane with her transmitter. The photo that I showed you earlier with the big backpack on the turtle, that's been reduced to this now. So just this little tiny transmitter that just gets attached to that ridge. So this is a map of Lady Jane's travels just since last summer. So as I mentioned, they are utilizing the entire Atlantic Ocean. So she cruised up north, she cruised up north there, then kind of hung around in the middle of the Atlantic. She ended up right down here in the Caribbean. And this point, right about there where she was on the map, was just about 2 weeks ago. So she has now come back and is she is off the coast of the Fort Pierce Inlet. She's about 10 miles off the Fort Pierce Inlet right now. So we are definitely expecting to see her again this summer. And this is messy, but this is the 2 different maps of the transmitters that she had. So this is from the 2021 and 22 season, 21 and 22 season, and then 24 to right now. So you can see just how much she's moving around, but more importantly, just some stats to show you how much they are moving. Since 2021, when she first had her satellite transmitter attached, she's traveled over 52,000 miles. To put that in perspective, that's 2.1 times the Earth's circumference. So she could have circled the Earth more than twice. If you're a traveler, typical coast-to-coast trip across the US is about 2,800 miles. So Lady Jane could have done that 19 times now. If you were to drive nonstop, 60 miles an hour, you'd spend 36 days nonstop on the road to have traveled as far as she has. So she's one of our favorites. We're really looking forward to kind of catching up with her. So if you're a social media user, definitely follow us on Facebook or Instagram, because we will be very excited to let everybody know when she comes back, hopefully within the next, I want to say, week or 2. This was one of the finds that we were very, very excited about. This was in 2014, the first year that we worked on Jupiter Island. We were cruising along, and we found a turtle with tags that we weren't familiar with. They weren't the same size or style that we use, so we didn't really know where they were from. And she also had a pit tag, that microchip that I was telling you about, in her shoulder that didn't really match our style either. So it took us a couple of weeks of reaching out. Thankfully, sea turtle community is pretty small, so we know who to talk to find out that she had actually been tagged in 2007 while nesting in Costa Rica. So this is the first time that a turtle had been documented nesting both in Florida and in Costa Rica, so we were pretty excited. Like I mentioned, this was in 2014. It's actually happened 3 times since then too. So what I was mentioning before, the genetic studies that we do, trying to figure out where did they come from, why are they here? They can venture from one country to another and establish a new nesting beach. We also, as I've mentioned a couple times, share turtles with Canada. So a lot of our turtles that nest here in Florida, they're going to go up there and look for giant jellyfish populations to forage on. Thankfully for us, there's a research group in Nova Scotia and Halifax that does in-water research with leatherbacks. So they actually work with the fishing community. They go out on their boats. They've got these giant dip nets that they can put into the water. The captains will observe a turtle. They'll follow it for a little bit to get close enough. They'll capture it, bring it close to the boat, tag it. A lot of times they'll put satellite transmitters on. We've actually exchanged a few turtles with them, where we either find their turtles nesting on our beach, or they'll find our turtles nesting up in their waters. This is a turtle I always want to talk about because she's just one of those powerful success stories of what leatherbacks are. So the photo that you're looking at, it's kind of a close-up of the top shell of a leatherback turtle. This turtle emerged in 2005. She was originally tagged in 2003. In 2005, she emerged with this injury. It's actually a boat strike. So there's a long scar down the middle, or opening down the middle, and you can see the prop lines. So these are the ridges that I was showing you on their carapace. So this basically went from head to tail on this turtle. She emerged to nest. She didn't emerge injured. She was obviously injured, but that's not why she was on the beach. She was nesting when our researchers found her successfully, but they called back to the office and they said, this is one of the worst injuries I've ever seen. You could see her lungs, you could see the tissue. These turtles at 1,000 pounds, they don't do well in captivity. There's really no way for you to take them into a rehab facility successfully. So there wasn't a whole lot we could do either. I mean, she was nesting, and she returned to the water, and we thought for sure this would be an injury that was fatal. Thankfully, 2 years later, one of the same researchers that found her in 2005 called in a flipper tag, and she said, this is the turtle that I have. And she didn't know who it was. And we said, wait a minute, that's Venus. That's the turtle you saw 2 years ago with the injury. This injury had completely healed to the point where there was just a faint line down her shell. With no medical intervention at all, these turtles have an unbelievable ability to heal. I mentioned from our original study, we had seen as many as 9 nests from one female. Once we started incorporating those satellite tracks, where we could actually use that data to see when they were coming up to nest, we found that some of these turtles are nesting up to 11 times in a single season. So over a 3-month period, they're coming back every 9 to 11 days and depositing as many as 11 nests in one season. So they're very productive. And this was another one of our favorite stories. So if you noticed on the slide before, about 70% of the nesting in the state of Florida occurs in Palm Beach and Martin County. Almost all of it is in Southeast Florida. Gulf Coast of Florida doesn't really get a whole lot of leatherback nesting. Back in 2020, though, we got a call from the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation. They had a leatherback that was nesting pretty consistently on Sanibel Island. Every 10 days, they'd seen 3 nests. And they said, we think this is the same turtle coming back. Would you guys mind coming over and seeing if we could tag her? So we ventured over there roughly about the time she was due. They're predictable at about every 10 days. And we were lucky enough to actually find her. And we did put a satellite transmitter on her. I don't think I included her full map. But she actually, from Sanibel, went through the Keys and up along the coast of eastern Florida. 2 years later in 2022, we found her nesting on our beach here in Martin County. So that was the first. It was pretty exciting. Her name is Juniper. This is one of our favorite turtles, and I have to tell this story to everybody. So this is Clover. Clover was tagged in 2003. There happened to be mother and son sitting on the beach right where she emerged. They loved the experience. They got to watch it with our biologists, and they decided to name her Clover. She was one of our more consistent nesters. In 2005, when she returned, she was missing one of her back flippers, and it was a very fresh injury. It was actually from a shark attack. It was fresh, however, it was healed. Like I said, these turtles have an incredible ability to heal. So she was still able to nest successfully in 2005. However, in 2007, when Clover returned, she was missing her other rear flipper. So now she has no rear flippers, both from shark attack. She obviously runs with a very rough crowd. But if you know a little bit about sea turtle nesting, these turtles, when they emerge on the beach to nest, they use their rear flippers to dig. They need to dig a hole in the sand where they're going to deposit their eggs. So without the ability to dig, Clover cannot dig a nest chamber for her clutch. Thankfully, like I said, she was one of our more regular turtles. So once we realized she was here, every 10 days we would go out and we would specifically be on the lookout for Clover. And we were lucky enough, if we caught her, to be able to dig. We would dig an egg chamber for her. We would serve as surrogate, I guess, and we would dig the egg chamber for her. She would deposit her eggs, and they would be actually very successful. If we didn't catch her, unfortunately, turtles don't really know if they're missing flippers, so they'll still go through the motions, but she would lay her eggs on the surface and unfortunately wouldn't survive. So I have a very grainy video for you here to show you kind of what it was like for Clover to come up and nest. So I just want to play that. So I'll turn that down. It's dark, but so you can see in the video here, those are actually her stubs. Leatherback rear flippers are typically about that long. She does not have any of the tissue that should be right here for her to dig that egg chamber. You can also see there's a little half moon shape there. There's also another sharp wound. Leatherbacks have massive tails. That's what you see here. That was actually uninjured. So what she's doing right now is looking for a spot on the beach to nest. So we're just kind of sitting behind her. This is all night vision, so there's no light involved. We're sitting behind her, kind of waiting for her to find her spot to nest and figure out where she wants to be. And there's a very distinct motion that they start going through. You can tell when they're digging or when she thinks she's digging. But that's about as much sand as she can normally move without the use of most of her rear flipper. The digging process for them normally takes about 30 minutes or so. And when successful, that egg chamber is usually going to be about 3 feet deep. This was one person on the beach, so we couldn't get a video of digging, but suddenly she has an egg chamber. There's a big hole in the ground for her to put her eggs in, because the surveyor that was filming this was able to stop and actually dig for her. So it takes a little bit of maneuvering and knowing what you're doing to get your hands in there and remove sand at the same time that she thinks she is with one of her rear flippers. So that's Clover successfully laying her eggs. And you can see them there in the bottom. So, and then I'm going to include this video too. This is of a non-Clover turtle. So this is typically what we're looking for as we're driving down the beach. It's not always going to be the turtle that you see. Sometimes they're all the way up in the dune. We're usually looking for that track. That track is about 6 to 7 feet wide, so it's very, very noticeable. It kind of looks like a tractor emerged on the beach. So this is the typical nesting process. That turtle, like I showed you with Clover, is going to come up, find their spot on the beach and start digging. This is a normal size rear flipper, so compared to what you saw in Clover.
Yeah, she is.
Sorry, it's very loud. Once they have that hole about 3 feet in the sand, they're going to drop those 60 to 80 eggs in there. This is the time period when we do our tagging. When they're actually laying eggs, they're kind of in a trance. They don't really respond to what's going on around them. This was shot with night vision, so again, no lights. But that's when we do our tagging. They really don't respond to what we're doing, and it's a very quick process to get the tags on them. And then they use those massive rear flippers again to actually, it's very delicate when they cover up. They will scoop a little bit of sand over the eggs and start pressing down with those flippers. So that's what she's doing here. It's covering those eggs up. Once they cover up with those rear flippers, that's when we have to get out of the way. They do what's called this rear flipper covering, and then they will turn on the front flippers. Their front flippers are massive. That is pure muscle, and they will start throwing sand behind them to essentially camouflage that area where they've just nested. And they won't just stay in one spot and do that. If you've ever seen a leatherback nest on the beach in the morning, they're massive. They wander all over the beach, throwing that sand behind them to try and make a giant mess, camouflage those eggs, and make it really hard for us to do our jobs in the morning when we have to go out and mark that nest. So before I play this, I'm gonna wrap up here shortly because one of my favorite things to do is take questions from all of you guys. So I've just got a couple more minutes here. This is just kind of a funny way to end the presentation. So these turtles that I mentioned, they're air-breathing reptiles, but they're also about 1,000 pounds. So for them to haul that amount of weight up onto the beach, when they're used to being essentially weightless in the water, is a lot of effort, it's a lot of exertion. It's not a quiet process. Ladies, if you've had kids, you know, there's a lot that goes on. And these leatherbacks are not quiet. They're very, very noisy. So I wanted to include one of our more spectacularly loud turtles. I'm gonna turn the sound up here when I flip to this. There's no video, it's just sound. I was sitting here in the dark next to this leatherback and I was just laughing the whole time because she's so noisy. So. Just give it a minute. That's her breathing or straining as she's moving around. This air is moving in and out of her lungs. And I just thought it was one of the funniest sounds I've ever heard. She gets better. That's a big exhale. So this turtle has been documented by our team as well as Loggerhead Marine Life Center's team and has affectionately earned the name Miss Piggy. So that's, she's one of our more extreme turtles, but it's always a fun story. When we're sitting out there on the beach, a lot of times we're working alone. It's dark, we don't use any lights, and you know, sometimes it's 3 or 4 in the morning and we do anything that we need to keep ourselves entertained. But it never gets old. I've only included a few of the field stories that we have, but like I said, I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. If you guys wanted to know more of the fun field stories we have, or you know, some of the more biology questions, life history questions, things like that. So I wanted to take time first to say thank you very much. As I mentioned, if you're interested in kind of following along, here's our socials. Thank you all so much. I hope that wasn't too sciencey before I get into kind of the fun stuff, but I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions. I'll take those from the audience. We are also going to take questions from our Zoom audience, so I know they're handling that in the back. They will ask some of those questions as well, so you can drop those in there. But no, I saw your hand first, so go ahead.
Are you tracking any males?
That's an excellent question. Are we tracking any male leatherbacks? We are not. So male leatherbacks actually never come ashore. Once they hatch, they spend their entire lives out in the ocean. So since our work is only beach-based, we don't have any transmitters on males. However, some of the in-water groups, like I was mentioning from Canada, they do a lot of tracking of male turtles. There's quite a few of those groups that do boat captures, so they do a lot of tracking of males. Tracks are very similar to what we see in females. Good question. Do we ever raise the clutches? We do not. That's actually not permitted in the state of Florida. There's not enough information really known about raising eggs in captivity. These turtles are kind of imprinting on their beach as they're incubating in the sand. If we were to move them around, we could be altering biology quite a bit, as well as I was talking about temperature determining sex of these hatchlings. We have to have those parameters exactly right. So it's kind of been determined statewide that we don't do any kind of egg rearing. There are other places where the populations have significantly declined, particularly like Central and South America, where they do have some hatchery programs where they will move all of the eggs just for protection. We really don't have a lot of issues with predation or poaching where we've needed to step in for that. Sure, right back here. Yep. Good question. Between nesting, do they meet up with a male? And I did not include that, but that's a fascinating topic. So typically they show up here in the spring, February. We've learned that from our transmitters. And they are typically mating offshore. They can mate a single time in one season and lay all of those 11 nests that I was talking about. However, through the genetic work that we've been doing, what we've found is that they can mate more than once in a single season, and there will be multiple males contributing to that clutch. So there may be 4, 5, 6 fathers within one clutch of eggs. And they can mate more than once throughout the season, so maybe they mate once at the start of season. That clutch just has one male contributing to it. If they go back offshore and mate again, that next nest may have 2 males contributing, and it may continue to increase over the season. Right here. Good question. Do all the hatchlings hatch at the same time? For the most part, yes. So that process is usually occurring at night, and they need to hatch at the same time. It's actually an advantage for them. So these leatherbacks, as you saw from the video, are sometimes 2.5, 3 feet deep in the ground. They're actually hatching a couple days before they emerge, and they're all kind of moving around. That kind of signals the other eggs, okay, it's time to go. They will all start climbing towards the top of that egg chamber at the same time. Essentially what they're doing is scraping away the sand at the top. That's falling down underneath them. And it's basically creating like an elevator effect so they can all get to the surface at the same time. So yeah, for the most part, they're going to hatch all at the same time. Sorry. Is there a problem with the sex ratio of the eggs? That is a big thing that's being studied right now with the warming of our beaches, the warming of our oceans. So yes, actually Florida Atlantic University is one of the biggest contributors to research looking into this. And as we've started to see average summer temperatures rise, we are starting to see a huge shift in the number of females that are produced from our eggs here in Southeast Florida. In fact, in the last 5 to 10 years, maybe even a little bit more, some of those nests are producing 100% female. So that is something that's starting to kind of pose an issue to the future of this population.
And Kelly, let's take a Zoom question, sort of related to that question. Have there been any observed shifts in the timing of nesting in Florida?
Good question. Pardon me. I like to talk turtles, but I also need to remember to drink water because I talk fast. So have we seen any shifts in the timing of nesting? That is one thing that we're starting to believe is really happening. So as I mentioned, our first nest this year was February 4th. Typically nesting season shouldn't even start until March 1st. Today is the 25th, and to my knowledge, there's at least 10 nests on our beaches in South Florida. So we're starting to see a shift in the nesting season to maybe earlier, so a little bit cooler temperatures to help adjust for some of that sex ratio that we've seen. We're also seeing a shift in where they're nesting. So typically, Southeast Florida was kind of the hub of leatherback nesting. But we're starting to see nests in northern Florida. We're starting to see nests in Georgia. And we're even starting to get leatherback nests up in the Carolinas. So it is possible that not only they're shifting in time, but they're shifting in distance to some of those cooler temperatures. Good question. All the way in the back there. Oh, sorry, is that?
One thing I found very surprising, myself anyway, is the fact that they go so far out in the open. I don't know why, but I thought they would stay perhaps 50 miles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you surmise the following food source? I mean, would that be your guess?
So why are they going so far out into the ocean? So With the hard-shelled turtles, the other 6 species of turtles, they're typically staying in shallow water and they're staying coastal. Not only because they have to, they can't adapt to those deeper temperatures, but mostly because their diet exists in those shallow waters. With leatherbacks feeding on jellyfish, jellyfish can exist in all parts of the ocean in all depths. So they're basically looking for food sources. And a lot of times we see that, and I didn't map it with these, when they are out in the middle of the Atlantic, they are still following some of the current systems, because a lot of times that's where the jellyfish will exist as well. And we have another zoom.
Yep, so we have a good tie-in to that with our Zoom audience. Do they eat all species of jellyfish, even man-o'-war, or are they selective?
Nope, they actually do eat all species of jellyfish. They do kind of have a preference, but I think it's just based on size. When they go up to Canada, they're eating these lion's mane jellyfish, which can get almost their size, obviously not their mass and weight, but they're kind of preferring these massive, massive jellyfish just to bulk up. But there are some really fun critter cam videos out there, if you go on YouTube and look for those, of leatherbacks just cruising around through the open ocean. And it looks like a video game, because they'll just stop, grab a small jellyfish, keep going, grab a small jellyfish. So they're just cruising along, eating whatever they can. Over there, far over there.
Yes. You mentioned that leatherbacks didn't start nesting here until like the 1960s.
Yep.
Do you think the reason for that is due to potential issues with the nesting sites they went to before?
Good question. Why did leatherbacks not really nest here till prior to the 1960s? Were there issues with where they were nesting before? So, excellent question. A couple of possibilities. One is it was just kind of a spin-off thing. These turtles, as you can see from their maps, are nesting all over the Atlantic. If they ended up off the coast of Florida and not their natal beach, but they were breeding and it worked, maybe it just kind of expanded the population from there. The other possibility is what we were just talking about. It could be a shift away from some of those warmer climates, because most of these leatherback beaches are further south, where there's a lot warmer beaches. So it could also be just a possible shift in where they're nesting for advancement of the population. Go ahead.
How do they navigate?
How do they navigate? Excellent question. So most sea turtles are actually able to detect, all sea turtles are able to detect Earth's magnetic field. So that's what we believe they're using to kind of return to their natal beach. Now, a lot of people have heard sea turtles are going to return to the exact spot from where they nested, from where they hatched. Not entirely true. They will return to the same region. We do have some turtles, green turtles in particular, that do return to almost exactly the same spot year after year. Some of our leatherbacks have nested in Florida, and 3 months later we found them nesting up in Georgia. So I think with leatherbacks, they do what they want. They're a 1,000-pound animal and they're gonna do what they want. So that's probably another reason that we're starting to see some of this expansion of the population. But navigation is primarily through use of the Earth's magnetic field. Migratory cues are what I was mentioning before, that pineal gland or the pink spot on their head. So they're using changes in daylight length to indicate when they should move from their foraging to their breeding grounds. I know way in the back you've had your hand up for a minute. Sorry, Zach.
The sex of the turtle is determined by the temperature of the sand. What point during the incubation does this occur?
Good question.
And can that be adjusted by intervention?
Yes. So at what point during incubation is the sex actually determined? Because it is determined by temperature. It's actually that middle third of incubation. That's when kind of male-female characteristics will develop. Each species has what we call a pivotal temperature, kind of that middle line where below this temperature it's going to produce males, above this temperature it's going to produce females, but it's whatever the average is in that middle third of incubation. Now we have found through some studies that you can adjust that. So if we were to take nests off the beach and incubate them in an artificial environment, or we modify the temperature, we can modify what the sex ratio is. Right down here.
I was just wondering, how fast can the leatherback?
Good question. How fast can a leatherback go? So through some of those maps that I was showing, we figured that a leatherback swims an average of about 2 miles an hour, which is actually similar for a lot of marine animals. They can, however, move pretty quickly in short bursts, so like 8 to 10 miles an hour if they need to. But on average, it's about 2 miles an hour. Mm-hmm.
So you said as they climb out the nest, they scrape sand to make a little thing that
Mm-hmm.
helps them out of the nest. Doesn't it cover the other half?
Good question. So I was talking about the little elevator that they use to emerge out of the sand. So that's why they typically all hatch at the same time. They're working together to try and shift that sand below them and lift them to the surface. Not all hatchlings hatch at the same time. One of the things we do on our nesting beaches is after a nest is hatched, we go out to dig up the contents. We want to see how many eggs were in there, how well it did, how many hatched. We do occasionally find 1 or 2 hatchlings that are still in there. They are able to eventually climb out on their own. It's just a little more work for them. So the ones that we find that are still in there when we dig that nest up, if they're healthy, we release them. Otherwise, we can take them to Loggerhead Marine Life Center, Gumbo Limbo, any one of the rehab facilities around here. But they are able to get out on their own.
All right, let's take a look at Zoom questions. I'm going to combine a couple of these into one. For those of us who live on the beach, should we be calling someone to let them know if and when we see a leatherback coming ashore to nest? And if we find loose eggs that have been dislodged from nests due to storms or other disruptions, what should we do?
Good question. Okay, so if you are on the beach and you happen to see a leatherback nesting, there's 2 answers to that question. Are you asking me? Because yes, I would love to know about any leatherback that's nesting. A majority of the leatherbacks that are going to be nesting here are already tagged, so I personally just love to know who they are. No, though, you don't need to be calling anybody to let them know about nesting turtles that you might see on the beach. They're typically good to be left alone entirely. There's a separate crew of people that are going to come out in the morning and look for the tracks in the sand to document all of that nesting activity. So you don't need to be making midnight phone calls. We'll get our rest and be up at sunrise. Sorry, second part of that question. Oh, eggs.
Eggs dislodged.
If you happen to find eggs on the beach, it's tough to see. A lot of people want to help. Unfortunately, at that point, if it's due to something like storm activity, erosion, or from a predator, if they're on the beach, they're already not viable. It's hard to look at, and sometimes people can just cover them up with sand. We ask that you not pick them up. We ask that you not move them. If anything, just cover them with some wet sand. If it's a partially exposed nest, maybe on a scarp or a cliff, you can call one of the local sea turtle groups, and they can come out and cover that nest up. But usually after that first 24-hour window or so, if the eggs are moved or exposed, they're not going to be viable anymore. These sea turtles are laying, 10 to 12 nests a season, so it's kind of factored into their numbers. So unfortunately, we do say you just have to leave those eggs be. Right in the middle here.
What is the estimated percentage of hatchlings that make it to maturity?
Good question. Hatchlings that make it to maturity. So kind of the long-term estimate has been about 1 in 1,000 turtles will make it from egg to adulthood. So not great odds. Again, they do kind of hedge their bets. They are laying up to 1,000 eggs per season, and they are returning every other year or so. And they could be breeding for up to 40, 60 years. We don't know. So that's kind of factored into their survival rate. They have so many predators, especially at egg size and at hatchling size. So survival rate's not great for that first period of their life just because they're snack size, unfortunately. Right over here. Yes?
Do the protection laws cover when you see someone going up, when you see a leatherback come out and they go up and they're drunk and they're blah, 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 thing, and I feel like they're...
Yeah. I see you've been out on some of our public beaches at night. So yes, are there protection laws for when people on some of our public beaches go out and are misbehaving or on nesting turtles? Yes, all of that is protected. No flash photography is allowed. You cannot approach the turtle. All of that is illegal. The biggest issue that we have with that is enforcement. There's just not a lot of law enforcement that's available at night to go help the sea turtles. They've usually got bigger priorities. So that's one of the things that we try to address through education. Our team is out there all night long. We've seen it all, you name it, we've seen it. So we do our best to talk to everybody that we see, tell them the proper way to behave on a nesting beach. A lot of our beaches here in South Florida are public and open at night, so we cannot tell people no. The best thing that we can do is trying to educate.
And that ties into a Zoom question. Somebody says, I would never do this, but I want to ask anyway. How close should the public be to a nesting turtle, and what guidelines should they follow if they're out on the beach?
That's an excellent question. As I mentioned, our beaches are open to the public. A lot of them are, some are private. We cannot tell people they're not allowed to be out there. And a lot of people have gone on turtle walks. So they know that turtles are out there and they know some of the rules. If you are out on a nesting beach at night and you happen to look up and you see an emerging turtle, the best thing that you can do is completely freeze and make sure you don't have any lights on. Once a turtle is up the beach and she's kind of getting ready to nest, it is okay to approach from behind, but you have to keep a pretty good distance, at least 20, 30 feet behind that turtle. If you get within line of sight, so you're beside the turtle, in front of the turtle, they are actually very easily spooked. They do not like people and they do not like lights. So it's very easy to cause what we call a false crawl, where that turtle will abandon her attempt to lay her eggs and return to the ocean, and will try to come up at a later time. So the best thing to do is keep your distance. The best thing to do is not to be out there at all. But if you are and you have no lights on and you're not disturbing the turtle, as long as you stay out of sight and behind that turtle, that's the biggest thing you can do.
Is there a difference in the size between the male and the females?
Good question. Is there a difference in size between male and females? Not really. It really depends. I mean, we've seen a huge variety. We've seen some green turtles range quite a bit in size, but it doesn't matter between species. I mean, we've seen some males that are very small, some that are big, some females that are 500 pounds, some that are 200 pounds. So there's really not a big difference in size between males and females. Middle back there?
If the male leatherbacks spend their life in the open sea, how do they protect themselves?
They're massive. Leatherbacks don't really have a lot of natural predators just because of their size. Clover is one example of their only real predator, which are sharks. There's been a couple of videos of killer whales, but we really just don't see that very often. So with sharks, they do have a couple of adaptations. Sharks can't swim backwards, and they're really not that agile. They're not going to make right turns very sharp. Leatherbacks can maneuver a little bit better. They also turn sideways in the water to make themselves appear even bigger to a predator. But really, they don't have a lot of natural predators. The reason leatherbacks are endangered is pretty much solely human-caused.
How do they find each other to mate?
Good question. Nobody knows. How do they find each other to mate? We have no idea. We actually know very little about leatherback mating at all. There only recently, in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, have been some videos, either via drone or people that are fishing, of male and female interaction, but we do not know how they find each other. Kind of just chance, and they all migrate to kind of similar areas during the breeding season. So they're scattered, as you saw on those maps, during their foraging season. They all tend to return to the same breeding regions during that nesting season.
And that ties into a Zoom question. As these turtles migrate north or into the open ocean, do they travel in groups or are they always solo?
Good question. So for the most part, what we've seen from all the tracking that we've done is they are entirely solo. There's very, very few documented interactions other than breeding interactions. There are some kind of clusters of where they hang out, but they don't seem to be interacting while they're there. They're simply there because it's a good food source. All the way in the back. Are they solo from hatchlings? Yes. As far as we know, there's not a lot of behavioral information known about the period from when they hatch to when they return to the nesting beach. Just in the last few years, we've started to look at that a little bit, but it would appear that they are entirely solo for their entire lives. That's particularly for leatherbacks. There are areas where you can find massive amounts of hardshell turtles, green turtles, loggerheads, not necessarily because they're interacting, but because they have all found the same source, whether it's for breeding or for foraging. There are mass aggregations. If you look up Rain Island on YouTube, it's an island in Australia, where if you look at an overhead view, there are thousands and thousands of green turtles all interacting with each other, but that's simply because they're there for nesting.
How old are the turtles before they mate?
Good question. How old are the turtles before they mate? So that's one of the things we've been trying to study through our tagging and our genetics programs. So it varies by species, but leatherbacks, we think, reach maturity around maybe 15 to 20 years of age. Some of the other species of turtle, green turtles in particular, probably don't reach maturity until 30 to 40 years of age. So, yep. And you had a question right down here.
So if something startles them and they will have to go back into the water, how soon will they lay those?
Excellent question. If something startles them from the beach and they return to the water, what we call a false crawl, how soon before they'll come back and lay their eggs? I have seen some turtles come back in 10 minutes. I have seen some turtles wait until the next night. So we're able to know that just based on the tags that they have on them. So if I see a turtle that has false crawled and she's going back in the water, but I can read her tags, then I find her again in 10 minutes. We know that because of her tags, but we do have some that wait until the very next day. The incubation period of leatherback's eggs is about 65 to 80 days, 60 to 80 days. It also depends on temperature. That doesn't just determine sex, it determines how long they take to hatch. The cooler it is, the longer it's going to take. The other species of turtle are a little bit shorter, usually about 45 to 50 days.
Let's grab another Zoom question. There have been recent advances with tagging technology miniaturization. Could hatchlings be tagged to get better insights into early life history?
Excellent question. Yes, they can, and they are. Florida Atlantic University and the University of Central Florida has a very big hatchling tagging program where they're developing these very micro tags, just about that big, to tag and track where these hatchlings are going. So they're really investigating what I was just referring to a minute ago. We kind of call them the lost years. It was really difficult for us to look at what turtles were doing from when they left the beach as a hatchling to when they returned as an adult. So within the last 10 years or so, we've really started to develop technology to where we can track some of these smaller animals, and it's been really successful. Good question. Do hurricanes have any effect on the population? They do. Simply because hurricanes in Florida typically overlap with the nesting season here in Florida. So if we get a big wave or erosion event, a lot of times we do lose some nests. As I was talking about, they kind of spread their nests out through the season though, so it doesn't typically have a huge long-term impact. It's kind of built into the biology of turtles to have to deal with storms. So we may have one season that's particularly detrimental, but over the course of things, it's not really a huge impact, especially because most of our major hurricanes are occurring later in the season, September, October, late August, and a lot of times most of our nests have hatched by that time of year. I see somebody over here. Yes, sorry. You're in the shadow.
Do leatherbacks feed exclusively on jellyfish, or do they have other diets?
Do leatherbacks feed exclusively on jellyfish? For the most part, yes. Jellyfish, tunicates, salps, basically those are all gelatinous food sources. When they're younger, they may be feeding on other things, but it's essentially whatever they can find. But for the most part, yes, 99.9% of their diet is going to be those gelatinous animals. You hear it? So are these transmitters that we're putting on these little hatchlings potentially attracting prey? I don't know the answer to that. I have not participated in any of the hatchling tracking, so I don't know for sure. I do know that they're looking at the long-term retention of those tags and how long they're staying on. So I believe that if the tags were immediately, shutting off after a day, every time they put one out, they'd probably have stopped by now. But no, it seems to be pretty successful. So.
How long does it take for the hatchlings to get a harder shell?
How long does it take for the hatchlings to get a harder shell? So when they hatch, when they emerge from their shell, it usually takes them a few days before they even emerge from the sand. In that 2 to 3 days, they're in the shell, they're all curled up. If they were to emerge like that, they wouldn't be able to crawl. So in those 2 to 3 days that they're in the sand, before they actually come out, they're straightening out, the shell is forming properly, and usually by the time they make it to the surface of the sand, they're in the condition they need to be.
We have some Zoom questions about how nests are managed in our part of Florida. Somebody wonders, do you protect nests with screen or chicken wire and mark them so beachgoers know where the nest is located? And if a nest is too close to shore or in a populated area, do you move the nest?
All good questions, and that answer entirely depends on where you are in the state of Florida. Our beaches are managed by hundreds of organizations, and every group has kind of a different method as far as how they do it. All of it is maintained or managed by Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission. So essentially, they're guiding those people that are out conducting the surveys on what the best practices are in areas where there's a lot of predation by raccoons, coyotes, things like that. People will put cages around those nests or screens over the top of them to prevent those predators from getting to the eggs. As far as do we mark all of the nests? No, we do not. Some beaches do. Those are typically the lower density nesting beaches. Here in Martin County, if we were to mark every sea turtle nest on the beach, you would not be able to go to the beach in the summer. It would be entirely staked off areas. We usually mark just a small fraction of the actual nests that are out here, and that's just for research purposes. They don't need the protection of those stakes and barricades around them. They're built in with the protections that they need, with the exception of maybe the rogue umbrella stand or something like that. But we are on top of things like beach furniture and things like that, so trying to prevent any injury to those unmarked nests. But no, we definitely don't mark all of the nests on some of our high density beaches.
You mentioned what to do if you happen upon a leatherback nesting. Is the same protocol true for the other turtles as well?
Correct, yep. If you happen across any species of turtle on the beach that's nesting, as long as she's healthy and it's at night, there's really no need to notify anybody about it. There will be a crew that comes by in the morning. Along what we just answered, a lot of people will see a nest maybe in front of their condo, they're in front of their house, and the next afternoon they realize it hasn't been marked and they're concerned. So they call it in. But like I was just saying, we don't mark all of the nests. So even if there's not a barrier around it, it was documented by the person that was out in the morning. Follow up.
Sorry, what I meant was like freeze until they're past due and then be behind them. Is that the same protocol?
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, same thing. The rules are a little gray here. We shouldn't be approaching any nesting sea turtle, but if you're out on the beach at night, you can't prevent that. So protocol is the same for any species that you're gonna find. Freeze, make sure you don't have any lights on. Once she is well up the beach and you're comfortable passing below her, that's fine. If you are going to stop, you can look from a distance. We just ask that nobody approach, close to behind that nesting turtle.
And I think the best suggestion, if you're interested in seeing a nesting turtle, is join a guided nighttime sea turtle walk that's led by scientists who have been trained by the state and hold a permit from the state. And a number of organizations up and down the east coast of Florida offer these in June and July. FOS is one of them, but there are other organizations that may be closer to your home that offer a similar type of guided experience that allows you a chance to see this process without having a negative impact on the nesting turtle.
Same goes for hatchling releases too. So if you're interested in either one, the best thing you can do is go with an organization that's permitted to do so. Zach mentioned there's a lot of organizations that do these guided turtle walks. There are a few around that also do hatchling releases. Those are usually first thing in the morning, or some organizations are right at evening, right at sunset. So those are all things that are offered through permitted organizations. Definitely recommend you check them out. It's a magical experience. We just give you the chance to do it the right way if you go with a permitted organization, and also it's a better experience.
Unfortunately, our time is almost up. I know we still have some questions on Zoom, and here at the library, we have time for one more question in the library. Anybody have a pressing question that we haven't covered yet?
Sure.
I've been a volunteer at North Beach, and the rangers there patrol the beach every morning.
Mm-hmm.
I think they mark every 10th.
Yep. Everybody has a marking scheme. So I worked on Jupiter Island. We were talking about the number of nests that you mark, and in MacArthur, they marked every 10th turtle. On Jupiter Island, on the southern port of Martin County, last summer I worked there, we marked every 45th. That's how many turtle nests are out there. We only had to mark every 45th nest. So it really varies everywhere. And if you watched the video of Clover that I posted, that was taken in MacArthur Park. I know.
Unfortunately, folks, we're out of time. Help me give Kelly a big thank you. We had so many questions. I let the question and answer session go a little bit long. The library does need to be closed and locked at 8. So,
I have to be on the beach at 8:45.
yeah, that was
to
my
work with
question.
these turtles,
That was
so.
my question. Is what are you doing tonight? Kelly's going to be out on the beach tonight surveying.
Last night in that, I don't know if anybody woke up at 2 a.m. to the storm that passed through. I was on the beach. It was a good time. Got about 2 hours of sleep, and I'm heading back out there tonight for another 11 hours. So,
So thank
Gotta
you
love what
for-
we do.
Thank you for giving up some time to be with us tonight. Folks,
all.
I hope I'll see you next week for our presentation about sawfish. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and thank you for your support.
thank you, Zach. Thank you very much.